Hey, welcome to AI at Work. I'm Kevin Williams, and today we have Matt Graham, who is the CEO of rapiddevelopers.com and based out of Boston, who's joining us. Matt has a really amazing background, a lot of really interesting entrepreneurial activities. In fact, when I first met Matt, he was sequestered in Turkey, actually, in a hacker house where he was surrounded by a bevy of other CEOs who are all locking themselves in a room trying to solve hard AI problems together, which of course, ticked my fancy right away. So again, Matt, welcome to AI at Work.
Kevin, good to be here.
So Matt, tell us a little bit about sort of your background and your road into AI and rapid developers and what you guys do.
Yeah, so we started the company about 5 years ago. We got our start during the no code revolution. So no code was this way to do visual development, and that really brought the cost down of development. So instead of writing all the code, like you could just drag and drop things on a canvas and be able to build digitally that way. So we've been on this trend of like everyone can build digitally. You should be able to build much, much faster than traditional methods. And now with AI, that's just 10 times more true. So you can build like really quickly, really fast using these tools. And so we're right at the cutting edge. We do lots of AI implementations, lots of AI consulting, architecting different types of solutions, and then we do the actual implementation for the clients that we work with. We work with folks all over the world. Our team loves some of the projects. They're like really complex, really cool use cases. So it's an exciting time to be in the space. There's so many things happening. It's also kind of scary because as a leader of a development firm, like the way you do development is changing drastically. So that has a large impact on our business as well. So both exciting and scary, but good time to be alive.
So you hit on no code, and I find that really, really interesting because a lot of the things that we do as far as workflow engineering and workflow optimization, AI makes a lot of that much easier to do, but no code and low code approaches have been around for quite a long time. So using Zapier, Make, formerly called Integromat, and then N8N sort of popped onto the scene as the first one of those that had leaned into AI. But a lot of the things that we call AI these days are actually just workflow automations. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that. No code and low code is actually something we've never covered on this show. So maybe elaborate a little bit about that and your journey from low code into AI and what that looked like. I imagine for you, December 22 was kind of a really exciting time as these new tools were obviously going to make your world so much better.
Yeah, so a couple things there. First, we could talk about workflows versus actual like different types of AI development. So a lot of AI development is workflow, and then there's another side which is just sort of software development in general, and that's either using AI to code to make software or actually having like an AI product. So there's a whole range of different things we can talk about there. In terms of the progression of the no code ecosystem and the evolution of that and how that plays into AI, I would say when 2022 came out, I was like really excited, right? This technology is going to change the world, but it wasn't clear like how much of an impact it would have on actually developing like writing code. It wasn't until like more late 2025 that it was like, wow. Lovable came out, I think, in like November 2024. It really took off in February 2025. And for folks out there who don't know what Lovable is, it's just a platform that allows you to just chat and generate applications or websites just by chatting. No coding experience needed. So that was a huge step change. And it wasn't until probably late 2025 where I started to realize like, wow, okay, the environment and landscape's changing drastically. You can really use AI to develop faster. And so what happened is before that, I was kind of convinced people wouldn't want more code, that this would be extra juice for the no code ecosystem where you could drag and drop things on a canvas. You could look at workflows in plain language like Zapier and N8N. They have this like visual interface where you can see the logic steps yourself and just read it in plain English. But what I think is happening is people are less interested in those step-by-step interfaces or these canvases where you can drag and drop. And really the chat interface is dominating everything. And so we'll see what happens over the next few years. Like maybe these two universes will merge and the AI chat based interfaces will have more canvas like functionality, or the traditional no code ecosystem platforms will have more of a chat interface, and they'll kind of converge into one kind of UX UI that everyone likes. But for now, they were two different ecosystems, not a ton of overlap. And I would say the AI side, the chat based interface is dominating the conversation, the airwaves, and also the things those are the platforms we're using as well.
All right. So I'm going to react to just a couple of pieces there.
Yeah.
I would say that at Ascend, one of the things that we find really frequently is we're often engaged to come in and hunt around for the ways to apply AI in organizations. And we start turning over rocks, and we start turning over rocks that the organization hasn't turned over for a long time. And a lot of the time, the things that we discover aren't necessarily problems in need of AI, they're just workflow problems. And particularly as you were describing in pre 2025, the best way to go about solving a lot of those workflow problems was with these workflow builders. And N8N was really the one that started to shine in that direction.
Yep.
But I wholeheartedly agree with you that there's been a step change really at the beginning of 2026, end of 2025. I mean, just the pacing of all of this is completely nuts. That N8N had like a year to shine.
Yeah.
And the no code approach to using vibe coding type tools, you mentioned Lovable, there's Replit. Of course, on this show, we talk a lot about Claude Code. And you suddenly didn't need those visual representations because you could basically describe what you were trying to solve. And yes, those visual representations can be really helpful if you're a process engineer and you're like breaking down every stage. But if you're a manager or an independent contributor, whatever it is, who's trying to solve a problem, the right way of looking at this in a lot of respects is what is the desired outcome, not what are all the things that are currently being automated. Because it's almost always a mistake if you have whatever process in your organization. It's 17 different steps, and Sally hands something to Joe, and Joe hands something to Dave, and you're like, okay, cool, we can use a workflow tool like N8N, and we can automate all 17 of those steps. Well, at the end of the day, there's something that started the process. There's like a trigger, some
Mhm.
need in the organization, and there's some output. And that is what sort of delightfully most people in organizations, that's the way they think about things. They don't necessarily need to care about all 17 of those steps. And I think what I probably missed was that by being able to chat with a coding agent like that, you can basically target your desired outcome and then sort of flail through what are the necessary steps under the hood to get there. I guess curious about your reaction to that.
Yeah, a couple of things. So first, yeah, N8N is all booming. You know, you get your certification. We're like, we're going to be official N8N partners. We're going to the moon. And then next thing you know, nobody cares about N8N anymore. So it's funny like how fast this stuff is changing, just to your point. On the workflow side, yeah, you dive in, you discover they have a Zapier portfolio of Zaps that are like, 1,000 Zaps, and some of them no one's touched for a long time and they're still running in the background. So there's this kind of like rat's nest that you have to dig through. Or you take the approach that you're talking about, which is you just think, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? What is it you're trying to achieve just from a business? Don't even talk about automation. Don't even talk about tech. What is it you want? Like, what are you trying to achieve? What's the output? What's the outcome? And then you can kind of do the steps you're talking about of, let us worry about the steps to get there, but just describe the overall goal that you're trying to achieve. I think where some of these visual things fail too is like those steps sometimes, if we're going to, you don't need AI for everything. So like a lot of CEOs are like, I want AI. And, they come up with a list of things they want. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. That's not really a great use of AI for XYZ reason. You don't need to automate everything. You don't need AI for every single piece of your business. Of course, there are parts that it will have a major impact for. And so where some of those visual tools fall short is sometimes you need an interface for the human to be the co-pilot, right? And so like the human can't be the co-pilot very easily if these steps are happening through N8N or Zapier and they can't interact because there's no interface for them to interact. So sometimes like for these more complex workflows that you want to insert AI and augment the process with, you still need your human co-pilot. And that's where like some of these interfaces work well. And so yeah, that's why we're using Claude Code and other types of tools to kind of achieve that business outcome that people want.
So the related topic is the difference between a deterministic process and a probabilistic process, right?
Yeah.
So many things in business can be deterministic, as in like 2 plus 2 is going to equal 4 every single time in Excel. And if it doesn't, something is really wrong with your Excel, right?
Yeah.
And you really, from an efficiency perspective and from a stability and quality perspective, you want to make sure that you're being deterministic wherever you can be in the process, using a lot of versions of these like low code, no code tools and how they've turned into AI tools, and only be applying the probabilistic layer, as in like where the AI needs to make sense of those outputs. That's the intelligence layer. So also from a cost management perspective, we definitely run into this phenomenon, sort of what you were describing with the CEO wants AI. Okay, well, we're just going to do AI. And you end up with this spaghetti bowl of information, and you're using a probabilistic layer to it. So you're using like an LLM interface on top of the spaghetti bowl of data, and it's really inefficient. And, one of the known weaknesses of AI is the drift and hallucinations and things like that that happen. And you can limit a lot of that if you try and stay as deterministic as you can, as long as you can, and then apply that probabilistic layer only in the decision point. And as a theme lately has been costs are definitely going up. I suspect costs will continue to go up. We're all going to have to be a lot more efficient about it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's best with deterministic processes, but so many things are probabilistic. And as long as you have a human in the loop, like it can still speed them up. If it's drafting something, drafting emails or whatever it is, or making connections through diverse lots of data sets that a human just can't look through. There's so many things that you could still use it for, even if it's probable not deterministic. Yeah.
So when you come into a new client, I guess first, what's sort of the archetype of a client for you? What does your client base look like? I think that can kind of help the audience
Yeah.
orient a little bit. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, senior leaders, but it tends to be, I would say, larger mid-market, or I'm sorry, larger small. So like big small versus small big. So, you might have 25 employees, you might have 50 employees.
Yeah, so there's sort of two main segments. First is our first time founders or our startups that maybe have some initial funding and they're trying to get a product off the ground. And so they're hiring us either for the UX UI or the product consulting or to actually build the application, whether it's web, mobile, or cross platform. So that's one segment. The main segment, though, is working with CEOs, let's say businesses from like 20 million up to $500 million of revenue, understand what AI could be doing for their business. So a couple of different aspects are one is education, whether it's getting their workforce trained, doing a workshop, hackathon to get people kind of understanding what these tools are and how to use them, or actually architecting a system, doing some consulting. We always start the consulting from a business side first before we dive into the tech side. But if there is some sort of tech component, then we can proceed with like the implementation if they don't have an engineering team themselves.
So typically, do you go in, which is it? Is it a push or a pull? Like the CEO has a laundry list of things, or the CEO says, help me figure out my laundry list of things?
It depends. Like in the old economy, it's more like, hey, here's my like general ideas. Can you help me understand and build a framework for me to think how to think about AI and where it can be implemented in my business? Other times for more tech savvy businesses, or maybe they have some engineering talent, they're like, hey, we've been mulling over this idea. We have a prototype, but we kind of need a professional come in and, now that we have a proof of concept, to actually make this very robust and scalable versus our team's too busy or just doesn't have the skills to be able to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so a little bit of both,
So what sort of solutions are you building for folks? So if you
all
had to
sorts of things.
compartmentalize it, like, what's sort of the go-to things that you are coming up with or your clients are coming up with for first areas of focus?
I would say there's a huge range. I haven't spotted too many distinct trends yet. I think one of the most distinct trends is like everybody wants a brain. They're like, hey, can you just build me a system that knows every single thing about my business and I can just talk to it and query it and ask it questions? Oh, and then can you add some agents so it can just start doing stuff for me? So obviously that's very broad. But I think like the brain, the concept of having like everything in one one system that can query everything that's happening, whether it's all your Slack or all the emails at the company or all the videos. We actually have this internally for our own company and it runs like a ton of stuff. So we have about like 250 clients at any given moment. And, we have every single email, every single Slack message, every single call transcript is loaded into this AI brain system. And it actually segments it based on project. And so we can see what's the status of a project, if there's any escalations, if anything's off track. We can see moments where the client is happy and we can ask for a review, or they're having a problem unrelated to our business and they just have another problem they need help solving, and we can connect them to a vendor that can help them. So this type of system allows us to have a lot of vigilance and monitoring and flagging important different types of alerts, like unlike we've ever been able to do. So that's why I'm excited about our types of businesses, because we can scale this in a way that's never, traditionally professional service firms have struggled to scale because of the human factor. But that's an example of something we have, something that we see quite commonly asked for across different types of businesses, regardless of sector or industry.
So we see the same thing. We're doing a lot of projects in that respect, and I do find it pretty interesting as far as a market whole. In that you
Yeah.
have like Glean. Have you heard of Glean?
Yeah.
So this is an enterprise solution that does this, and it does a really pretty good job of it, to be honest. Like, I want to like poo poo
Yeah.
like enterprise solutions. It's not cheap for sure, but they're doing a pretty good job of pulling in a lot of different pieces, and they're allowing people within these larger organizations to operate with a lot more flexibility, because the system, the brain, also has guardrails that are built around it. I suspect, given my experience with sort of mid-market type companies, the brains don't have as much guardrailing in place, which is okay with the clients. They're understanding some of the trade-offs as far as information sharing and some of those risks it entails, but that's a complete non-starter for others. And I'm curious on your take as far as, why isn't there a good solution for this that has popped up yet? Because it is glaringly obvious. It's also
Yeah.
very hard to do, and both of us are monetizing it, so okay, by all means, market, don't do this. But what do you think are the why hasn't the market come up with a solution that cleanly builds a more mere mortal version of Glean?
Yeah, I think what we discovered when building it ourselves is this, like, the fidelity of these systems drops drastically once you get too much information into it. So if you have 5,000 employees, good luck. Like, this is going to be, that's just way too complex and way too much information for to be kind of organized by these systems at this point. Everything I think could change in the future. But for us, the secret was when we can figure out a way to segment the data, like, for example, projects. If we have 250 clients, we create 250 little mini brains. And those 250 mini brains just monitor everything for that one client, the Slacks, the emails, the call transcripts, just for that one client. And then the fidelity is extremely high because its brain is big enough to see thousands of Slack messages, emails, and call transcripts for that one client, but it's not capable of seeing billions of lines of text across all our clients. And so when we think about how to make this work, we try to figure out a way to cut it so that the brains are sort of, in smaller batches. And that makes the fidelity much, much higher for the result. For the alerts, for the querying, you get much, much better feed messages and back from the system.
So I'll say on sort of a continuum, like what you're talking about, I would say sort of is pegged to the right side of the continuum of it being pretty robust on a per client basis. Obviously, it does have caps as far as size. These things can also be really expensive to run, dear
Yes.
listener.
Yes.
That it's something that you need to be very careful with, because you're rapidly falling out of the just running a Claude Max plan or running a
Yep.
$100 a month GPT plan or whatever it is, and all of that's working. As soon as you start building these things, and I can't emphasize this enough, you fall out of those monthly plans, and now you're in API land.
Yep.
And the API, the cost per call, continues to go up as these companies are heading for IPO. So
Yeah.
you always want to be cautious about that. And it's still worth it. I mean, when we talk expensive, if these things are well built, it's not that bad given the amount of functionality that you get out of them. But then on the other side of the continuum, we've talked a lot on this show as far as building your own personal chiefs of staff and being able to use things like Claude Cowork or GPT agents in order to get some of those pieces out of the material. So I don't want anybody listening to like freak out that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars. It's going to be all of this development work. And then we're going to have this high operating cost to run these things. Like there's a starting point, which is essentially simply tying in the agent structures that are already part of your Claude Max plan. And I tend to be a Claude guy, so I tend to go in that direction. But you can get a long way along this continuum by simply tying in Claude or GPT via a connector to, say, your project management tool or to your email or to your calendar and be able to get a lot of insights from that. So if you're a 1, 2, 3, 4 type person company, like you don't have to get crazy about this. I guess sort of react to that.
Yeah, no, I think the other thing that we see commonly, people coming to us, CEOs are like, "Hey, I got this thing, but it costs me $10,000 a month or something." And we go in and we see it's just, the folks that we're building it aren't as proficient and haven't had enough reps yet. And in general, there's just not that many people in the market that have experience actually building real things. And so some of the work that we're doing is just optimizing the stuff. Like, hey, well, you're using like a blowtorch to light a cigarette or something, right? Like you don't need that. Like let's stage it. Let's do like the initial filter with the cheapest models possible. You don't even have to use the premium models. Like some of the open source models could be good. Like there's a lot of models out there that are much cheaper for the simpler tasks that you want to do some initial layer of filtering for your brain, and then you query it more complex with like the higher end models. So there's ways to kind of cut the cost down to be more reasonable, and that's actually like a fair amount of work we see coming in. Yeah, I think in general, I think the cost of the models will come down. So I don't know. I know they're all getting ready for IPO. We'll see. But the other thing is like hosting things locally. Like there's some companies that are really worried about privacy and sending all their stuff to Claude, their trade secrets. I think that's more for much, much bigger companies. But like people are still thinking about that. And maybe they're in a HIPAA compliant healthcare industry and they need to be aware of like what model they're using, or they have to use it locally. So there's all those types of governance, security, and cost issues that we see all the time too.
Yeah, it's funny because if you have a max plan, like I don't know about you, but I
Yeah.
tend to just use Opus all the time
Yeah. Same.
because
Same.
why would I want the dumber model? And it does make you pretty inefficient if you take that same logic and you apply it into an app build. And there is a lot of nuance in deciding which model to use, where, and for what to get the highest level of efficacy for the lowest cost. And that's a little bit of an art. So for those of you who are listening and you have people who are working on this, or you yourself are working with it, you always want to play that game. And you also want redundancy that's built into the system as well. Like, as much as I like Anthropic, it goes down all the time. And if you're totally dependent on a single model, this is going to be a problem going forward, that the CIO or the CTO is going to wake up one day and realize that like their entire stack has basically collapsed just because of one point of failure, because Anthropic couldn't handle whatever the load is. So we call this like rejiggering. We actually call it AI plumbing, and I think it's actually going to be like a thing. Where why do you call the plumber? You call the plumber because the pipes broke, right?
Yeah. Or he
And
scrums up.
nothing against people who were building in January 1, 2023. But as you said, nobody really knew what they were doing at that time. And a lot of things have been built over the last 3 years that you'd never build it that way in the first time. And
Yep.
now it's fragile and it needs to be
Yep.
reconstructed. And I don't actually see spinning this up as a product line, but like I could totally see people like us running businesses that are the AI plumbers
The
who
cleanup.
go back and they rip off the duct tape. They, they like reconnect things in a more efficient sort of way going forward.
Yeah, like I had a post. It was like vibe coding cleanup specialist, and that's like a new role. Like there's tons of stuff like that. It also begs the question, Kevin. I'd be interested to know what you think of this. Like I was doing a speech somewhere. For like a conference I was at, and somebody asked like, "Hey, I'm scared to invest in AI because I feel like everything's changing so fast. Let's say I do this for my accounting system, but someone's just going to come up with a product that does exactly what I just spent 100K to build, or whatever it was, right? So how do you think about like, hey, where should I invest or where should I wait? Because I sometimes it's not always great to be first. Sometimes, especially for small businesses that don't have the free money tree, every dollar counts. Should they be what framework should they have about where to invest and where to wait to see if someone productizes something off the shelf for them?
I think it's a great question, and the way that I usually put it to people is you want to build something if it creates a competitive advantage for you.
Hmm.
That there's nothing on the market that really solves the problem in the way that you need to solve the problem, and it's going to make a difference to the way that you go to market. The next category are the buy category, and the buy category are the things that scratch an itch that are generally adjacent to the rest of your business. That things that are important, but they're not necessarily urgent, and they don't necessarily have to be perfect for the gears of the business to keep turning. And then the last category is basically wait, because if it's not in that I need to build it category and you can't really find it in the buy category, there are probably two Estonians with a dream in their garage who are building it right
Yeah.
now in whatever vertical you're in, and it's going to pop on the market. However, I will say that I am kind of pivoting a little bit in the way that I'm thinking about this, because just by the nature of SaaS, I mean, I don't know, what do you use Salesforce, HubSpot? What's sort of your CRM of choice?
Oh, we're actually replacing it with like a AI native CRM.
Okay, so there you
Clarify.
go. But anytime you open a CRM, you can see the effect of broad market SaaS, because it has to be everything to everyone, and then it ends up being kind of nothing to anyone. And so you're a sales business, but that's not actually your business. So being able to build a customized SaaS internally, or CRM internally, is something that would have fallen into that buy category before. But I promise you, you're never going to find a CRM that's going to scratch all the issues that you want. And
Yep.
because you have the capacity to build it, it can make sense, particularly when there's a big ticket that's associated with it. I mean, you've got a lot going on. So your previous CRM bill was material. It was, probably five to $10,000 a month, I would guess, given your size, and that adds up. Internally, you're not going to spend 120 grand developing a solution that works straight for you. It becomes a matter of prioritization, I would
Hmm.
say. And this I run into a lot. In fact, this is happening right now with a client who I dearly love, but they are doing amazing things in changing their product and making huge product investments that are going to totally differentiate them, but that has their team so stretched thin that when they're confronted with, say, something that's like a $400,000 like project, they just don't have the time for it, and they
Yeah.
don't have the training or the tools or the staff that can like actually go in and solve that problem. But they probably should be building the $400,000 solution as well. And really, that's where people like us come in. That's where they should be focused on the rocket science per their business. That's where their hiring should be. That's where they're going to find the best and brightest who are going to bring AI to the product. But as far as executing in the rest of the organization, for at least a time here, you really do need organizations like ours to be able to solve those problems.
Yeah, I think let's use ERPs as another example or another category that we see. We talked about AI brains being like such an obvious like ask in the market from lots of CEOs. I think ERPs are another example because they're just so old and antiquated and terrible to work with and expensive, and the service cost on top of the software cost is enormous. So I think that's like a good example to your point of don't wait for that. Every ERPs are always so horizontal, so generalized, and there's so many things and agents that you can build off an that are custom to your business. That's an example. Maybe it's not the CRM, but maybe a ERP is an example of something that you really want to own yourself and invest in. Examples that are bad, I think, are like, 2023, everyone making custom voice agents versus just waiting for VAPI, where now it's like super easy plug and play. Same thing with chatbots. Everyone's making their custom chatbots in 2023. And now there's like a million just off the shelf tools to do your chatbot and your knowledge base off. I think accounting, anything with some types of invoicing will eventually fall into that. I think there's a lot of people working on bookkeeping and accounting tools because it's so labor intensive and it's so easy to kind of augment that with AI. But yeah, I think those, just to add some examples to the framework you presented our listeners.
So I find that I have sort of a visceral reaction now to SaaS platforms that are desperately trying to stay alive by like walling off their data or figuring,
Yep.
like, I mean, they've got to do what they've got to do. But now that we have the flexibility to basically build around it, that's another category where if the platform isn't going to give me the access that I need to do the things that I need to fully automate the rest of my process, that moves it up in my ranking as far as something that I'm likely to build versus buy. And
Hmm.
I am looking at you like accounting platforms out there. Like it just makes me die inside
Yeah.
to interact with some of these things. Now, there are pieces of that puzzle that I'm never going to touch. There's no way you're going to have, I'm going to try and recreate like Stripe for
I was just about to say,
transactions.
don't be a payment processor.
Yeah,
Don't try to
don't be a
deal with Stripe.
processor. Don't be a like Gusto. I hate paying like payroll. It's expensive, right? To do payroll, and it looks basic, but they're dealing with 50 states of
Governments and
regulation and
like
200
yeah,
countries.
anything compliance heavy, stay away.
So and that actually lends itself a little bit to an investment lens, right? Like you can be doing something that's really seems like it's obvious to be recreated, like payroll or state tax compliance. So there's like Avalara that does state tax compliance out there, and there are other platforms that do that. But they're taking on a lot of that liability in a way that if you do it wrong, you could actually go to jail. So those that gives them a barrier. Now, what that experience looks like if I never have to go into Gusto, the payroll processor ever again, that day will be too soon, but I need them to do the thing that they do best. That may not suit their stakeholder needs or their growth needs or their market needs or whatever it is, because at the end of the day, they're a regulatorily compliant structure that is
Hmm.
headless, that I do all the cool stuff that I want to. That isn't a very sexy business, and it certainly doesn't require 10,000 employees to run that business. So, forward looking on what that turns into, I think is really interesting. And if you are one of those companies, if you are a SaaS company, you need to be paying a lot of attention to what I just said. Like how are people like Matt and I and our clients,
Gonna build
how are
around
we
you.
looking at your platform as far as the pieces we need? And the more you try and cram me into your UX,
Yep.
the more likely I am to try and just do it myself.
Yeah, I just called my financial advisor, maybe I think November 2025 or December 2025 was a huge step change for agentic AI. And since then, I called my financial advisor. I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen to SaaS. I've always told you to go heavy on SaaS. I'm telling you now, let's maybe diversify, pull out a little bit. As somebody who's in software every single day, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'm saying for sure SaaS valuations are going down. Their moat is disappearing, which their moat was like the cost of development, which is heading towards zero, and the migration costs, which all these agents, it's no one's talking about this, but in a few years, you're going to be able to click a button and say, copy all my Salesforce configuration settings, all my database, everything from Salesforce over to this new CRM. And migration cost is going to head to zero. And I think in the next few years, but no one's talking about it. So, anyways, I'm pulling out. I think the only SaaS product, I even like the LLMs. Kevin, I'm not really sure. Like, I know everyone's talking about a bubble. I don't think it's a bubble. I'm not like doomed to stay or about that, but I just think they're in a commoditized industry, and I'm not sure if they're really that good of as a businesses. Like just as a business, like it seems like lots of people can build LLMs and lots of people can have data centers, and I'm not sure it's a winner take all market or monopoly. And that's usually the type of companies you want to invest in, monopolies, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm even hesitant about the LLMs out there. So yeah, I'm not sure what the future holds, but that's my quick take on that. I got an idea for you though. Let me bounce it around with you if you got a minute.
Oh,
Yeah.
hell yeah.
Okay. So on this like this ERP idea, one thing we're floating around doing a campaign around is, hey, let us build some of those custom software for you, and we actually won't charge for the build. We'll charge for the payment side. So we'll take, instead of you're already paying 3.2% because you're using an expensive, let's say ServiceTitan. You're already using ServiceTitan. It's super expensive to have certain service time, super expensive to get the implementation help and the service help. And then on top of that, they take like a pretty big chunk of your all your revenue. Why don't you just let us build your service sign for you? We'll be the service provider and we'll maintain the system and it's yours. You own it. And we'll just make our money off the 3.2% that service sign already charges you. So like, I wonder if that could become a model in the future. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think realignment of pricing is something that's coming our way. So we do some engagements that we're basically helping SaaS companies figure out, or service companies like accountancies and
Hmm.
things, figure out like what is their new pricing model. Like, people like us are like output, 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 right?
Hmm.
But that's kind of hard to figure out.
It
Like how
is.
much
I know. I think the world is good. I think that's good for clients. It's good for us to be accountable, but it's like, I want to do that, but it's so hard to measure and actually do it. Right.
Absolutely. And there is just this like optics of it's a $200 a month, subscription into the SaaS, and it's doing things, and you never really do the arbitrage math of how much am I on gross, you're getting stuff out of it, but if it starts charging you on an incremental basis, now you have this like variable cost factor that you're trying to figure out and trying to manage against. And it's going to just drive controllers completely crazy as they're trying to figure this stuff out. And it's going to be all over the board. So, it's something I've said a number of times here is it's like, look at all of your vendors. If you want to save some money in your organization, who is charging you by the hour as opposed
Hmm.
to by the project? And at
Hmm.
the very least, you should be applying some pressure to them such that they need to start thinking about this in terms of deliverables. Like, think about lawyers. Like, what is a trust worth to do?
Yep.
Like, I think that's pretty easy. It's much harder if it's like a trial and it's built on billing. But
Yep.
even internally, we have this question.
I was just going to say, Kevin,
Like
that sounds all wonderful, but like, how do we even do it internally when your team is
exactly,
also paid in a way that it's like,
yeah.
how do you make sure the output's fair? That's the hard part. Is like, is this ticket in the development world? We go off tickets, milestones, story points, and we
Hmm.
try to like, indicate what the size of the workload is for that milestone or that ticket via story points. But it's still a subjective process, and now
Yeah.
it's affecting someone's pay. And
And yeah, our best like workflow engineer and automation people, they're like, wait a second, if I'm getting paid by the hour, you're actually disincentivizing me to create scaled products that don't require my input, because although we have plenty of business, like it's still finite if you keep scaling it. And these people's jobs are absolutely not in any danger, right? But they're like, you're disincentivizing me
yeah,
such that I'm supposed to work longer on this.
yep.
So we're trying to figure that out, and I think it actually requires a decent amount of transparency in the organization, such that everybody understands what the expected, like, what's the IRR, the internal rate of return.
Hmm.
You want to have a solid gross margin, and then you want to encourage the team to outpace that gross margin such that they can share in it. And as a greedy capitalist, that puts a cap on your individual like engagement contribution, but aligns incentives with the team such that even if they're a non-equity participant, they get to participate in that success of the company, and the
Hmm.
company is still getting its nut as far as the number. Yeah. I want your rejoinder on that. I do have some thoughts on your transaction model too.
Yeah, yeah. I think the world will be better if everything's aligned for output versus, that. I mean, didn't SpaceX do this, right? Like, they disrupted the entire defense industry because they said, "Hey, you're gonna pay us based on the outcome, not on the, by time and materials." Which historically, for the last 100 years, that's how the defense complex has been paid, right? So, and look at them; they're now a $2 trillion company. And so, when you align incentives like that, it creates a lot of value for others, and it allows you to capture value too.
But it's not very predictable from a financial perspective. So we're
Yeah.
we're both MBAs, right? So
Don't tell people that. Come on, they're
yeah,
not going to
well,
listen to us.
yes, no, we're coding geeks. That's all we
There we
do
go. Yes.
all day long.
All
But
right, dirty secrets out, everybody. Kevin and I have an MBA.
yes,
Don't think less of us.
so but it becomes really hard from a predictability perspective. And
Hmm.
when it's nice for us to say, okay, this all should be output based. But when you go to a client and the client says, well, how do I set my budget?
Yep.
Well, it's hard for me to tell you how to set your budget because it's all output based. And
Yeah.
surely that's valuable to you. But the whole organizational structure on their side has been built around financial controls and budget predictability and whatever. And then even though whatever you're doing is ideally creating a lot of economic value in larger organizations, as soon as you blow through that budget, like all
Yeah.
kinds of flags get thrown,
Yep.
and it
Approval
creates
processes.
complexity.
Yeah.
So they want predictability.
Yep.
And being able to do both output and have predictable costing is something that I don't think that we've figured out yet.
Great point. I'm actually going to write that point down because that is brilliant.
Yeah, but it matters as you're talking through repricing about all of this, because it's really easy for guys like us to say, "Hey, let's just like disrupt the entire organization and let's just break it." And you know what? I actually do have a couple clients who are game for that. And it really is a gut check to be like, we're just going to redo everything in the organization. And it takes a special brand of leadership. It takes people management and change management in addition to the tech to make all of the things work. But most companies don't want to do that. They want the things they're doing to continue to work. It's not really in their cards to try
Hmm.
and replace their accounts receivable staff. Like, why would we do that as opposed to just making it easier? But we're yet positing that you should do that because that disruption creates the opportunity for rebuilding the organization in a way that fundamentally makes more sense.
I think a lot, well, it's surprisingly, I don't know if it's surprisingly or not, but I was talking to one of the large AI platforms out there. I won't name it, but we have a meeting with them every 2 weeks, and they were talking about how fast adoption has been in the mid market versus the larger the company, just way more complex, way slower, not embracing it, very scared, skeptical. And so, like, they're actually having a ton of success with small businesses and mid market businesses because they're just so much more nimble. They can adopt these. And some of the leaders are still the founders who are cut from that strain of like, yeah, just burn it all down. Let's try something new, or just like a little more risk taking personalities versus your corporate CEOs who, were brought up the corporate ladder to lead the company versus the founder entrepreneur who started it and is leading it.
So I'd love your take on the other issue that's been floating around, which is job displacement. And again, we try and stay away from politics here, but
Hmm.
I happen to have been listening to an All In podcast this morning, and they're all like really kind of relaxed about it. They're just blaming all cuts on AI washing. Oh, overhired. So of course this is just AI washing, and they're
I
just
have
so yeah. And yet I look at my client base, and I mean, whether they're saying it overtly or not, that's what they're after.
I think, yes. So a couple of things on this. First, meta level, like I'm definitely worried about like the labor market. I love history. I've read lots of history whenever I get free time. It's like a fun hobby and topic for me. And generally, I would say, there's nothing new under the sun. Our society has seen disruptive changes before. People have trouble skilling, but it does happen, and new jobs to be done will be created that we can't even imagine now. Okay, I got you. That's happened many times throughout history. I think the problem with this change is it's just so fast, and money moves faster than ever before. Technology moves faster than ever before. And so, yes, maybe on the other end of this revolution won't be okay from a societal job standpoint, but the interim, which will probably be like 10 or 15 years, just because people can't learn new skills quickly and their behaviors are, especially as they get older, are stuck. They don't adapt. And we can say that's not right. They need to adapt and we can be harsh about it. But the fact is just that's how most of the population is. So I think there's going to be a lot of job losses. There's going to be a lot of turmoil in markets and in governments. I think they'll probably overreact and try to, equilibrate or redistribute wealth or whatever, however they go about it. But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of disruption on the labor front. I think most of the conversations I'm having with folks, they're like, oh, yeah, we don't want to cut people. We just want to make them more efficient. And I think they're being very genuine about that. But I think subconsciously, that could change as the technology gets better. But for now, what's definitely true is they do not want to hire anyone new.
That's the
And
key,
so
right?
Yeah.
that
So
it
like,
that go ahead.
regardless of that they're cutting or not, doesn't matter. But like, they don't want to hire anyone new.
If the company was growing at 20% a year and therefore its headcount was growing at, if you're embracing efficiencies at 10 to 15% a year, what I am definitely seeing is it's still growing at 20% a year, but they're capping headcount.
Yep.
So those extra labor units aren't going to find the homes that they used to. And I think it's a little bit disingenuous for people to say, "Oh, we're just going to create all of these new industries and there's going to be all these entrepreneurial opportunities,"
Hmm.
when those entrepreneurial opportunities are predicated on leaning into these technologies, which means that solopreneurs or like partner groups, small groups can build so many more things without having to hire the administrative load. So I've done the math, and it's, you have to be, if you assume that you're going to create something like a 50% efficiency in an organization, you would have to basically double the economy to find homes for all of the
Yeah.
people who are dislodged. If the efficiency is 90%, the maths out to something like 35%, 35 times GDP of how much we're going to have to grow GDP in order to create all of those edge
Yep.
opportunities of, be it services, be it new plumbers, like whatever the heck it is, for all of those people to find homes. So I know that you have children. So how are you talking to them about this?
Well, I'll jump into that one quick reaction, and is sorry, I do got to go in a little bit here. I got to text this guy in a second. But a quick reaction is also within our own company. Like, we can build so much more effectively with these tools. We don't need such a massive workforce. So just to make this conversation full circle, even for us internally, we're struggling with that because we don't need as many people, and so that put some hard decisions on our plate that we have to make in terms of layoffs and, trimming down the organization size. So we're at the cutting edge. We're experiencing that, and it's actually like something I have to deal with as a leader in our company all the time. Okay, now to the fun part with kids. Okay, I think the future is very bright for children. Like that, I think part of me is worried, of course, that there won't be jobs for them. But this is where I think the other side is. I'm more worried about folks that are, 25 to 45, somewhere around there, that generation. But I think for children that are maybe 10, they're going to grow up using these tools. There's going to be a whole new creator economy and entrepreneurial economy, and if you can try to encourage your children to be creative and resourceful and have some hustle, I think the future could be really bright for them. So my own son, does he going to love this, Kevin? We over Christmas, my son loves 3D printing. I think you love 3D printing. Is that right?
I do. I do. I'm a 3D printing bona fide geek.
Okay, cool. Oh, nice, awesome. I love it. I wish I had some stuff here. I have so many 3D printed toys throughout the house. I actually was using printers to print printers. So at one point it came full circle. But my son's got into it, and the tech is so good now for children. He wanted to sell 3D printed Christmas ornaments throughout the Christmas season. So we used Lovable, and it has like a voice mode, right? My son's only 10. He can't like really type prompts, but he can just tell it like what he wants. He's like, hey, build me a website that does blah, blah, blah about selling 3D printed Christmas ornaments, whips it up. I'm there helping him out a little bit, but like for the most part, he's able to get this thing up and running. Then he puts he prints some QR codes, and he goes around the neighborhood and stuffs in mailboxes the QR codes. And guess what? You want to know how much he actually sold during the holiday?
No, go ahead.
$500, almost
As a
$500 worth of
10-year-old.
Christmas. Yeah, 10-year-old, man. So I always tell people this is the new age lemonade stand. Okay. Don't do a lemonade
Mhm.
stand anymore. If you're dad or mom out there, have them build a quick Lovable site and try selling something through Lovable with QR codes at their school.
Isn't it cool? I know you have to go, but it's this idea that there's these barriers to entry to various things that are out there, and they're just so low right now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a coder. Like, I could never build things without using like low code, no code tools. Now I can build whatever I want, which is absolutely amazing. And I don't think that most people have really figured that out yet. That if you can dream it, if you have a product story that you want to tell, now you can build that product in a way that you just couldn't before. You don't need to wait. You don't need to go to university and do a whole coding degree. No, you just have to have the idea and some wherewithal to muscle your way through. And then the rest is distribution, right?
Yep. No, I'm super. It's really cool. They took something. It's scary at the same time, Kevin. So that's all sounds amazing. But think about this: Like that used to be a service that we would charge, $5,000 to $10,000 for. Now my 9-year-old son on a weekend can build his website, right? Like, so at some point, like, oh, it's like awesome. Like I see that side, but then depending on the day I wake up, how I feel in the morning, it could be also pretty scary, right?
Well, hey Matt, thank you so much for joining us. This has been super fun, and it's cool to hear what you're doing and what your clients are doing. I guess if I had one parting question, it would be, what is your personal tech stack? Not company, not
Yeah.
corporate, but what are the tools that
OpenClaw.
you couldn't live without?
We're using OpenClaw a lot right now, and Claude Cowork, Cursor, Lovable a lot. I would say those are the ones that are always at my fingertips.
All right. All
Yeah.
right, Matt. Again, thanks for joining us. If anybody wants to reach you, what's the best way of doing so?
Yeah. Hit me up at mgraham@rapiddevelopers.com. Feel free to hit me up on X or on LinkedIn as well. Yeah, those are the best channels.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Kevin. See ya.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to send us a question to answer on the show, email me at elijah@spark6.com. That is SPARK, the number 6.com, or Kevin@ascendlabs.ai. To learn more about AI strategy and training for your business, visit Kevin's company, Ascend AI Labs, at ascendlabs.ai. And to learn more about design and development of custom AI solutions, visit my agency at spark6.com. You can also sign up for my free newsletter, AI Framework Friday, by visiting spark6.com/newsletter.